Hi, I'm Brian. Welcome to Autogefühl. Regular viewers may know that I have more than a little bit of a soft spot for commercial vehicles. So when Thomas asked me, would I be prepared to come and take a look at the brand new Opel Combo? Well, I was more than a little bit excited. Why? Well, traditionally we know this vehicle very well in my corner of the world, the UK, as a commercial van. But for the first time it's being launched everywhere, not only in commercial format, but also as a customer car. Now, Opel say that they've developed it right from the floor up for the passenger experience. So rather than looking like a commercial vehicle that's been made to fit people, this should look and feel and behave exactly like a car throughout. Well, I'm very excited to put that to the test. If form follows function quite as well as it can, does that mean that what we're going to end up with is an extremely exciting, very cost-effective MPV? Or does it mean that the compromises will be too great on both sides? Let's take a closer look and find out. This is only the second car that Opel have used the EMP2 platform on. The first one was the Grandland X SUV. You may have seen Thomas's full review of that slightly earlier. So there's an awful lot here for Opel to prove. If you've noticed that I'm always slightly hesitating on the word Opel, it's that they will always be Vauxhall to me and anybody else who comes from the UK. But that's just a UK thing. Now, obviously it's a little bit challenging when you select a platform for a vehicle that not only has to have commercial effect, but also practical family ones as well. This is where the compromises are clearly going to start. If you look at the styling of this car, I would really encourage you, don't be too harsh. Its bones are a commercial vehicle, and I think it's only really fair to consider it in those terms. If you say, yeah, but Brian, come on, it's being sold to us as a passenger vehicle, my response would be, well, take a look at the pricing and take a look at the competition before you get too carried away on the styling issues. Now, that said, given that this is a compromise from a commercial product, I think they've actually done rather a nice job. Obviously, we have a big, bold, bulbous front here, but the grille takes a lot of that edge away. It's nice and stylized. The plastic feels like it's good quality. Yes, it's not the most refined finish, but I don't think you're going to be embarrassed driving up outside the school to pick up the kids in this thing. I like the way that the logo and the modern styling has all been put together, including these really nice signature boomerang headlights to make it feel contemporary. Yes, it does sit high off the ground, but as we come round to the side, you're going to get much more of a sense of why that is. The key behind the design of any commercial vehicle is that you have to be able to maximize the space you have available to you in order to deliver the most efficient package that's possible. And I think if you take a good look at this car from the front, and come on, take a good solid dose of it's not a Ferrari, I think you're going to have to agree they've not done a bad job here. The Combo is 4 meters 4 or 14 feet 5 inches in length. And as far as the height goes, 5'11" or about 180. That's just a touch taller than I am. Now, for me, this is where the design and the practicality of this car really starts to show itself off. Just take a look at this. From a design point of view, when you look at the front of this vehicle, you might think, that's just a bit too much for me in terms of its boldness. But this is why. Look how limited this overhang is in front of these wheels. Can you imagine the amount of maneuverability that gives you? Well, one thing I can immediately tell you it does give you, and this field is a good clue to that, is a really nice ride. Not only on the motorway, but also when you take on a slightly more rough, slightly less forgiving terrain. Now, in terms of efficiency, you're going to want to go with the smaller wheel size. That would be the 15-inch, that's the entry level. Here we have 17-inch alloys. And I have to tell you, for the larger wheel size, I'm actually quite pleased with the way that aesthetic works out, but also you don't sacrifice too much in terms of comfort. Jonas and I have already taken this car in places I'm not necessarily sure that we should have done already, but we really did want to make sure that it handled lots of different terrains and environments well, and it really does. Now, you would expect that coming from a commercial vehicle. What you're always going to be wondering is, but am I going to be sacrificing anything in terms of comfort and in terms of, well, let's be honest, luxury of passenger experience? Well, more on that when we take a look inside. But for now, let's take a sweep slightly further down this car. Well, yes, we've got big, solid, flanky doors that take up a huge amount of visual space, and here again in the back. But this is the short wheelbase version of this car, and what I do like is that they've managed to make it look quite compact and cheerful. Although it is unquestionably big, it doesn't feel overblown. And if anything, all this big siding only really adds to a feeling of solidity that you get with the car. And we have some nice styling details like these additional effects on the doors just to make it feel a little bit more comfortable and not quite as commercial as it otherwise might do. Coming through to the back, we can see the rear passenger section. Now, the model that we have is a 5-seater. You can get them in 7 seats, either in the short wheelbase, which is what we have here, or in the long wheelbase. We'll take a look a little bit later on to see how practical that is, especially on that third row. But for now, you can see the way that the passenger's experience is actually quite nice back here. Let's take a quick look as to how the door works aesthetically. Well, you can see, look at that nice, easy entry into the car. As I said, compromise. One of the things I like about these designs is that they're very, very forward in terms of making your experience and usability as easy as it can possibly be. And for me, I am prepared to sacrifice just a little bit of that aesthetic appeal in order to get my practical use. When we had our press briefing earlier on, Opel were very keen to point out to us the modular nature of this car, and we're going to be hearing more and more about that from many of the other manufacturers in the years to come. Why? Well, because it makes it much more cost effective. Instead of having limitless options and designs that are only unique to one vehicle, you have a toolbox of different components that you can put together in order to make new models. The nice thing about that is you already know how some components will compare and be used with other components when you put them all together. Now, remember that overhang at the front? Look at this overhang at the rear. There's nothing to it. Well, there are two really nice things that gives you as a driver or a passenger. One is comfort and the other is maneuverability. And that makes a huge difference when you're driving something that is essentially a van. Why? Well, you need to know where the corners are, and anyone who's ever parked a commercial vehicle understands exactly what I mean. The closer you can get those wheels to the front and back sides, the easier it is to park, the easier it is to maneuver, and most important of all, the less likely you are to spend time in the body shop. Now, coming round into the back, look at these lights. I think they've done a really nice job of making these feel much more contemporary and much less van-like. You will see them on a little bit later, and what you can see are the different elements picked out in the light. So instead of one solid block of red, they do look unique and they do look stylized just for this vehicle. That's nice. Now on this model, we have a standard fold-up rear entrance, but I want to show you this because this is something that you might be a little bit more familiar with. He said if he can make it work. Here we go. There we are. From SUVs. Look at this. Now that's just the first of many things that I want to show you about this car that are much more in keeping with a car experience and much less familiar to anyone used to commercial vehicles. Now, some of the times we make these videos, people say, come on, you know, you're being a bit too positive about this car, and that certainly isn't what I want to present. I just would really like you to be able to think about this in a slightly different way than just saying, it's a commercial crossover, you either like that or you don't. I'm a big fan of the practicality offered by cars like this. So I want to see if maybe once you get into some of these details, you might be too. Because this car's all about storage space, we're going to do a lot more on the interior in a little bit. But for now, let's just talk about your experience of entry. Well, I did say that there were going to be some compromises made, and for me, this is one of the first ones that I notice. I am a huge fan of saying that anything you touch on a car should be of the best quality. Now, if you're used to pressure entrance devices on the rear of cars, then usually they have some sort of rubberized feel. I have to tell you, I don't know if you can pick that up on the microphone, but it is very much a hard plastic experience. Is it the end of the world? No, but I would have liked something a little bit nicer when I'm opening up the hatch. That said, it opens effortlessly, and if Jonah can just point the camera here, I don't know if I'm asking a little bit too much. Can you catch those, Jonas? You can see what I'm talking about. Now, once you get used to using this car, it's no big deal at all. I can tell you that we have one catch in the center, and that does the whole of the rear boot, and either side we have separate catches, and they do that glass entrance that I showed you earlier. These obviously are only lights for the number plate and don't open anything. Took me a while to figure that one out. We have lots of really good reversing camera options on this car. We'll show you those later, but they work really effectively. Now let's take a quick look at the boot. Well, we're not going to go crazy about this at the moment. We just want to give you a sense of what you can experience when you open it up. Now, this is the 5-seater model, so we do have more than enough space. If you can see Jonas's tripod, I think this is actually the best demonstration. That's his tripod case, and that is going in completely easily like that. When they're telling us about this boot, they're very keen to point out you really can fold flat the second row of seats, and we'll show you that in just a little bit. And you can fold the passenger seat flat too, and that means you can fit over 3 meters of load space into here, and that's huge because it does mean, I don't know why, but if you need to transport a friend's surfboard, you can put it in the back of the car. What you're looking at here is 597 litres of load space. But if you flatten those seats out, you can take that all the way up to 2,126 litres of room. And as you would imagine, this is originally a commercial vehicle. That is an enormous amount of load space. It should be too. Let's have a look at some of these features for the passenger version. Well, everything here is based on practicality. Again, with the compromise, that's likely to mean that it doesn't feel quite as luxurious as you might like it. But again, I'll take that practicality any day of the week. So look at this. This is just nice. It's very straightforward. It's, you know, pretty unglamorous, but you know what? It does the job really nicely without any drama. It's very easy to maneuver. If I want this on a lower level, look, I have a separate set of runners here. Again, I really appreciate that because there's lots of times I still want access to my boot, but I don't really want everything to be fully visible underneath it. So I think that's a very nice feature. I like this layer of practicality here. We can already see some of the moldings that would be in use if we had a third row here. We have cup holders on both sides. This is a nice touch. A 12-volt charge socket for your rear seat passengers or for anything you have in the back. I don't know, Jonas, like camera batteries. Always good to have a place to charge those up while you're working. And then just acres of room. Little triangle here. We've got a first aid kit on the other side. There really is plenty of practical use back here. But, and we're going to have a little bit of fun with this later on. They told us when they gave us this car that it had 28 different places to store things. They claim you can't find them all if you try, so I think we might have a go a little later. But there are lots of nice innovations they've added to this car to make you feel there is a benefit and a reason why you would go with a commercial vehicle crossover rather than just a standard MPV. Look at this. And that's really nice. We'll show you from the back seats, but you can access this via sliding panels from the back seats. Why would you care about that? Well, if you're used to traveling with small children, and in this car that is a big selling point, as Jonas can show you slightly lower down, all 3 of these seats have tether points on. That means you can fit 3 full-size car seats next to each other. That's excellent. All of that clutter that children are required to travel with can just be put up here. So a younger child, you've got some nappies, some diapers up here, some wipes, older children, books, DVDs, whatever it is, they absolutely have to have. And the nice thing about that design, as you can see from the rear view mirror there, is that none of that stops you being able to see out of the back. It's been very nicely designed to sit right in with the roof lining, and all it does is just adds extra storage. And the whole vehicle's designed that way. So if you're a big fan of having lots of space for your kids to lose your things in, I really think there's a lot to like about this car. One of the things we're really keen to do here at Autogefühl is not try out features on cars until we do it on camera. Now, the downside to that is it can make us look a little bit silly, but the reason we do that is so that you, the viewer, get to see how genuinely easy or not adapting these cars for other usage actually is. So unusually for us, we're going to go straight from the boot straight into the back so we can see how that space is better utilized when we're taking advantage of this row as well. So that was beautifully straightforward. But let's just take a quick look at that mechanism again, because I think I'm quite a fan of the way that that works. Obviously, unlike traditional MPV where you could actually completely remove the seat, in the 5-seater version or in this row of the 7-seater version, these seats just fold down. But look at that. That is pretty impressive flat loading. And I think you can immediately get the sense that if you have something to put in here, it really isn't going to be, oh, okay, so we can tell a little bit that Jonas was in that chair. That much of an effort for you to be able to do it. Look at that. That was no effort to me whatsoever. And we've got a huge loading area here now. As we're in the back, why don't we have a look at that storage from another side? I'm going to climb in so we can see how the available space is as a passenger. Well, okay, let's be honest about this. That's me in the front. I have short legs, we all know that. So if I'm sitting behind Jonas instead, let's see. I think I'm going to need to move your chair a little bit, Jonas. So this seat is where Jonas has been sitting in front. So if I move this back, we can get a much more realistic idea as to what the rear legroom looks like. Well, I'm 5 feet 10 or 178 centimeters in height. And look at that. Acres of space. I have more than enough room back here. These seats are not movable. They don't have the capacity to go forwards or backwards. So the load space you have in the back is static unless you fold these things down. But once you're back here, what's the experience like? Let's take a look. Okay, well, you already get the sense that it's quite easy to move throughout the cabin. This, I would say, is one of the first new features that Opel are particularly keen on. I've got pretty mixed feelings about this. I have to tell you, I'm very interested to see what you think. It looks really stylish at nighttime when LEDs illuminate the whole side, and I think the kids would love that. You can see where my finger is tapping here. There's a central divider here. Now, Opel say there's another one here, 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 and these are all what Opel describe as storage spaces. This is where I'm not completely convinced. I would never put anything up here, and I absolutely know that if I ever told my children there was somewhere they could put things up top here, I would spend my life driving around in this car listening to pencils, sweets, rubber balls, anything you care to mention running backwards and forwards the length of those compartments. I don't know, but I do like the idea that they're trying to think of new and innovative solutions to storage and make the most of this space that we have. Now, also, this is hardly a new idea, but it's nice to see it fitted in this car. We have these plastic tray tables. They're not the most refined things in the world, but they do feel nice and solid. And for a child's use, more than sufficient. Also got elasticated pockets underneath. Down here, we have heating and cooling controls. You can adjust the fan speed, but not the temperature. That's done from in the front. You can also obviously adjust these vents. Slightly further down, we have a USB charge point. That's obviously going to come in very useful for anyone sitting back here. Are we all done with the storage back here? No, we're not. Let's see what else we have. Well, we've got one of these on either side. I have literally no idea what that's there for. But I think maybe some type of extra feature for the car in terms of how you lock the blind in place, possibly when you want to screen off the back. So not a storage area. But We also have, I'm going to guess, any viewers got a guess on that? I'm going to say that's a suit hanger under there. What do you think, Jonas? You going suit hanger? I was kind of hoping it was going to be a little special secret storage area, but there are a few of those up front, and I'm definitely keen to hear what it is you think we could put in them. Polite responses only. I think it's also worth mentioning while I'm here that the number one most likely purchaser of this vehicle in particular will be people with families. Anyone who has a family car will know ease of things in, ease of things out, ease of cleaning. Those are the things that you care about most. And if you have a look at this channel here, I really appreciate just how easy it is for my children, covered in mud from head to foot, can climb in and out of this car with all their equipment. And more important than that, I can clean up after them. Now, okay, in a real world, I would love to have finished that statement by saying, and then they can clean the car later. But come on, we all have to be a bit realistic. So now it's time to get to the proof of the pudding. Well, the exterior is going to be something that either speaks to your taste or doesn't. But I think the real tell for a commercial crossover is how nicely has the cabin been finished. Can you convince yourself you're actually in a passenger car and not in a van? Let's take a look and find out. Well, I'll have to say first impressions are excellent. Not only does this optional panoramic view greet you with lots of light pouring in here, which you certainly don't expect from a standard commercial vehicle, but everything does look clean, modern and stylish. Now, okay, I understand, yes, there's an awful lot of hard plastic immediately on view, and these fabric seats are certainly not going to be the most luxurious thing you've ever seen. But again, compare at price point, and that's what you have to do in order to see what you think about how this vehicle stacks up. We'll get into the pricing a little bit later, but would you be surprised to learn that the entrance on this car, that's not equipped as this car is, but this car at all, is under 20,000 euro. I think that speaks volumes in terms of both what you can expect and how happy you should be about what you actually do. Now, when I climb into the cockpit itself, I'm immediately pleased with how comfortable it is in here. We've put some miles on this car already, and I can tell you that the seats stand up very well, not only to highway driving, but also to a little off-road excursion as well. As far as the cabin design itself is concerned, well, for me, I would say that it's a compromise between trying to give customers everything that they want within the context of a modern car and keeping that price point down. So you have to have a little bit of flexibility in terms of what your expectations are. But that said, there are some design features within the cockpit where you can't help but think, I just don't know if it really had to be that way. It would have been nice if they'd have thought about it a little bit differently. One of the comments that you may see online a lot is that people are not necessarily massively impressed with the UI of the infotainment system. Well, I think that's a little bit unfair at this price point, but we all are in love with the functionality of our phones these days. That means Android Auto or Apple CarPlay, and for those things to work, you need a cable. Now, I would ask you, if you want to plug a cable into your car, where would you least like to plug it? Well, okay, there are worse places it could be, but look at this. That's how you connect with the infotainment system. Well, why is that so bothersome? It looks okay, doesn't it? Well, it kind of does, until you realize that in this car, that means an awful lot of interaction in this general area. There really is no good way of doing that. You can throw your phone down into this absolutely cavernous storage area down here, and maybe I'm just being a bit picky, but that would drive me nuts. So I absolutely have to have it here. This is where the phone is supposed to go, and this is a nice mix of the new. We have here an inductive charging pad. Well, again, I think in order to get the best of my phone's features, I want it plugged in. That's just my taste. If you don't need your phone plugged in, it will never bother you. But we can see other features that are a little similar to that elsewhere. If Jonas shows you just here on the steering wheel, we are all more than used to having audio controls baked into our steering wheel now. I don't understand why you would necessarily do it this way, but again, it could just be me. That's track up, that's track back. I would have liked them this way. That's volume up and down. Very small detail. But that's the kind of thing that can drive you absolutely insane on a car over time, or you just get used to it. Again, maybe that's just me. There are lots of little compromise features like that. We were playing with the heating and cooling earlier, and I'm just going to switch the car on to show you, because This for me is a great example of where really nice design has come into design areas that maybe could have been just a little bit more thought through. This display is so clear, it's so nice, so easy to read. I can immediately see what my temperature is and how to control it with this really ergonomic, nice feeling switch here. This button here shows me exactly where the air direction is. So far so good, right? Well, yes, but what's the most likely thing I'm going to want to do with it? I'm going to want to increase or decrease the fan speed, right? And to do that, you can see what my problem is. I have to reach round the gear stick and worry myself with this again in order to be changing the fan speeds. Now, I guess if you have it on auto and you're automatically changing it, you could say, come on, Brian, nobody uses those buttons anymore, you don't need to. Fair enough. I just would have liked to have seen them integrated a little bit better. But I do like the way that visually this section works, and as I said, for adjusting the temperature, which is the most important thing, it works really, really nicely. So talking about those many storage options, let's take a look and see if we can find a few in the front passenger area. Here's a challenge for you. Who can tell me what this is for? Now, I'm guessing maybe some change for parking. Jonas and I were joking on the way over here that maybe this is where you keep your favorite golf ball, which is the only one you don't want to lose and you have to have with you at all times. But there are loads of interesting little quirky storage spots right throughout this car for you to discover. We already talked a little bit about this huge, enormous storage area. I don't think I've ever seen one this big in the middle of a car. Why is it this size? Well, it's a nice idea, really. You can fit 2 full 1.5 litre bottles of water here, or anything else you care to transport, side by side. That is a really nice feature. Don't want to look at that, just want to keep it full of stuff, then you can access that easily from there. The more conventional, traditional storage space back here, from back here, and it actually looks quite nice and flush when it's all closed up. So if you need somewhere to store lots of stuff, perfect. Coming over slightly further to the side, we can see we have 2 in-dash storage units within the car. Now this is nicely designed. Look at this. Ordinarily when you open a glove box, all you can see is user manual, but the contrast might be a bit difficult to pick it up. They're not small, they're 2 manuals and they sit right back here on a shelf. That's fantastic because you can just keep them there, forget about them, ignore that they exist, and you still have your full storage bay here. Few of you with sharper eyes might be saying to yourselves right now, wait a minute, you told us there was only one way to plug into the infotainment system. I can see a USB port. Well, yes, you'd be right, you can, but charging only won't allow you to connect to anything, which for me is a little odd, especially because right next to that, we can see we have a 3.5mm jack to connect an audio source. But I'm being picky. Slightly lower down, we have a really handy shelf for pens and things that you really need to access on a frequent basis. And this is the lower storage area, a little bit smaller here, but still a very convenient little spot to keep anything else that you could need to hand. We also have the storage well just here, again for bits and bobs, one behind the infotainment system here, and if Jonas swings around to have a look at the door, you can see that we are more than nicely equipped to carry some things in there. I'm determined I'm not going to miss any of these storage areas, you know, Jonas. Now up here, you might think, what on earth would you want to store above your head? But I can tell you this is a really great spot for small road maps, newspapers, books, you know, anything else that you have with you that constitutes clutter. You want somewhere to put it, you don't know where. These things are great. Anyone who's ever driven a van will tell you they're a lot more useful than you might think at first glance. So the first thing I want to tell you about the driver's experience is a feature that has carried through from models that I have never seen on a commercial vehicle before, and I can tell you that this doesn't just come on the Combo Life, the passenger version, but it's also now available on the commercial version too, and that's this head-up display. Now, okay, is a little bit of compromise, not least if you're my height and I have a very long torso. So although I have ample headroom here, that does put me quite high up in the car. So I can adjust the information that comes up on the head-up display, but you are slightly at risk of having a little bit of an uncomfortable thing where the graphic drops down slightly into the bonnet. It's just a minor visual irritant, but it's worth knowing about if you do have that slightly higher torso. It just takes a little bit of finessing of getting that display exactly where you want it to make sure that that is going on the road, not on the car, in terms of how it relates to your driving experience. But we'll talk more about that later. It does give you all the nice information that you want. Coming further down, I really like the simplicity of the driver's display. We do have a digital display in the middle here, and it gives us all the information we want. It tells us what our fuel efficiency is, it tells us what our average speed is, it tells us what the speed limit is. Now we have on this car cameras that look at the road signs. If we have a look up here, we can see a nice little feature. American viewers might be much more familiar with this. This enables you, it's a parabolic, do I have the right word, Jonas? Oh, it's only AJ who's going to pick me up on it. This is a parabolic, I can't say it. I know what it is, I can't say it. This is a parabolic mirror. So it allows us to see all of the passengers at the same time. That's particularly nice if you're traveling with children. It means that this remains focused on exactly what it should be focused on, which is of course your rear view out of the back of the rear of the vehicle. Now, the overall feel of the space here is undeniably one of plastic, but that's to be expected, and I have to tell you, the positives of that are it all looks brilliantly easy to keep clean, and it really does look very modern. They've done an awful lot about breaking these surfaces up to provide you with lots of different levels to look at. It isn't distracting, it didn't draw my attention away from the road when I was driving, but it is pleasing to get in and out of this car. It doesn't look boring. There's a lot of design in here. And as much as these wells might drive me absolutely insane after a bit, because I knew where my house keys went to when I put them in there, but I'm still going to end up having to search through 28 different compartments to find them when I get out, it does lend itself to making you think, gosh, what a practical car this is. And I like that immensely. Everything about this car says, use me. Most important of all, we need to take this thing out on the road and see if everything about the experience says, drive me. Let's go take a look. We're sitting in some traffic in Wiesbaden at the moment, waiting to get going again, and this seems like a perfect opportunity to start telling you about the driving experience behind this car. Well, this is going to be the point at which there is no denying the DNA of this vehicle. It is, by its roots, a commercial vehicle, and there's no hiding that in the drive. But that's not a bad thing anymore. We're used to the idea that commercial vehicles traditionally have lumpy, clumpy gearboxes. They're not so nice to drive, they're not so refined, they make a little noise. But commercial vehicles have come on a very long way, and that's very nicely demonstrated in the Combo Life. Yes, it still drives a little like a commercial vehicle, but the sound deadening's good, the gearbox is really smooth and easy to use, and the driving experience overall is really pretty indistinguishable from a car. In particular, I would give credit to the gearbox for being really smooth and not in any way van-like at all. Now, we have the most powerful of the additions available. So this is a 1.5 litre diesel engine. It produces 300 newton meters of torque and 130 horsepower. How does all of that come together? Well, it actually... Now, I did ask her to stop speaking to us while we were doing this, but unfortunately the system, even though it told me she would not speak to me, does not seem to have taken me that seriously, so apologies for any interruptions. So we can actually get from 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in under 10 seconds in this car, which sounds like it might be a little bit more than you need, and bearing in mind there are smaller engines. There's a smaller diesel and there's a petrol as well. So if that much speed is not important to you, then you don't need to go crazy with it. But honestly, having driven this around in various different terrains, I would say that that's probably the power level that you're going to want, because a whole amount of the experience of driving this car is in making you feel as close to a car-like experience as possible. And for me, a lot of that comes down to when I sit on the Autobahn and I need a little bit more acceleration to go, then I want to put my foot down and I want the car to move. And this engine does deliver that. It's not going to blow your mind when you put your foot down on the accelerator, but it is going to give you the power that you want, and it's going to deliver you a nice driving experience. talking about driving experiences, so how is this around town where we currently are? Well, positives first. The engine is smooth, the stop-start function works really nicely, so I don't even have to think about it. It's pretty effortless. The gearbox is great, couldn't say enough good about that. The braking is fine, it's crisp. The steering is light, bearing in mind there are only 2 of us in this vehicle. A little later on, we'll try and drive a fully loaded one to see how that steering holds up. You do get body roll on corners. You expect that in a higher vehicle though. Talking of which, the road position is great. I have really fantastic, nice space within this road to occupy. But that is the whole reason behind this slightly higher vehicle. If you drive one of these for commercial reasons, you'll know how important that is. So you wouldn't expect the passenger version to be any different at all. The B-pillar, well, it is massive. So you do have a little bit of a blind spot. But coming in 2019, there are going to be lots of new camera options available for this, and I think that's going to make a huge difference. The one that we're driving has 1 rear view camera, but it's going to be available with 2 later on. That gives you the full rear view to make sure parking is as safe as it humanly could be. There's also going to be a camera fitted into the wing mirrors here, which allows you to see right along the flank of the car and takes out this blind spot, which, as I said, is massive. That's part of the sliding door thing. It's very difficult to impossible to design a vehicle this way without having that huge B-pillar there. It's just something to be aware of while you're driving around. I've got great interior visibility. I really like this little mirror up here. That allows me to keep an eye on what my children are up to in the back seat. The design of the cockpit and the way that that impacts on my drive overall, I would say is pleasant. Yeah, I find some of these controls on the steering wheel a little bit niggly, but that might just be me, and I'm sure that the more that you drive this, the more you would get used to that. Having mentioned that I am quite excited and a fan of the idea of having head-up displays in some of these lower down vehicles, I'm not completely convinced with the way that this system is delivered. I like the information, but I found it almost impossible angling the display to make sure I get the information where I want it. It is very distracting if you drop it down far enough to make sure it's fully visible, because it does have a tendency of creeping onto the bodywork, and that definitely pulls your focus away from where you really want it ideally to be. You can't make it any higher because then some of the information disappears off the top of the screen. But you know, there are always little quirks with vehicles. This is one of them. I'm sure you get used to it and adapt to it, and it is entirely possible that that's only a consequence of my long torso. So if you're a little lower down than me, you might not experience that at all. As I think you can see on the camera, I have acres of headroom here, and I really appreciate that. It makes the driving experience very comfortable indeed. These seats are actually really nice. I think that's an additional benefit of commercial vehicles. You can't design a car that you expect somebody to sit in 8 hours a day every single day without putting good seats in it, and those carry right through into this car. Jonas, what's your verdict on the seats?
I like them.
There you go, the ever eloquent Jonas giving a thumbs up to the seats there. They're really comfortable, and we've taken them on mixed terrain, and combined with the McPherson suspension that the car has, it does give you a very comfortable ride. I feel nice and assured, nice and stable, and I have a good all-round sense of this car while I'm driving through town, and that's great. Now, we always knew that a vehicle like this is going to feel comfortable while we're driving through a town setting. I think the question is, are we going to get the level of power and comfort that we want once we hit the open road? Well, there's only one way to find out. We're on the highway now, and we're driving at 100 kilometers per hour, and as you can hear, the sound insulation is great. It really is no problem at all to cruise along at this speed all day and all night, and there is more than enough acceleration to get me out of any sort of jam that I would want to get out of. I like having the more powerful engine. I think it makes sense. Now, I know there's a lot of concern around about diesels at the moment, but honestly, a huge amount of work has been done, and the mere fact that these cars are still being sold is enough to tell me, at least for now, that you can be confident buying one. Why? Well, because if the government change their legislative position at a later point, you are going to be capable of a buyback scheme. I'm certain of that. There are huge advances being made all the time with particulate filters. please feel free to do your own research, look into it, make sure you're comfortable. As I said, I am, but I would do my own research on an individual model before making that commitment. A diesel engine is still a very efficient thing, and it still produces a really nice power range when you drive it. And in a car like this, it really is perfectly adapted. Now, that said, the petrol engine that this car can come with is an award winner. It's got a very nice inline filter built straight into the engine itself, which never needs any adjustment or maintenance whatsoever. So that's really quite reassuring if you buy the petrol version. I guess there's still a big part of my psyche that belongs to diesel, I think, especially in commercial vehicles. Please tell us what you think in the comments below. I'm sure that's a little bit controversial. Now, once you're on the highway and cruising, you very much get the feeling that you could sit here all day and all night. This car is designed for comfort, which means that once you're on the highway and rolling, there really is nothing to cause you any degree of stress whatsoever within the driving experience. Everything just feels comfortable and nice. The braking is fine, the steering is every bit as responsive as you would like it to be. I'm keeping raving on about this gearbox, but it really is very nice and easy. And for once, I'm really happy to say they've done a great job with this gear knob. Oh, come on, Brian, really? You're going to talk to us about the gear knob? Well, you know what? I kind of am, because it seems like such a small detail, but when you spend so much of your time using a piece of equipment, it should feel right under your hand, and this one does. It's got just the right weight and size. Now, we've got a nice bend coming up here. Let's have a look and see if we can show you some of that roll. I'm traveling at 60. That's faster than I should take this, but I want to show you. There you go. You can see that roll is not too bad at all. Now, I took that bend faster than I would automatically have taken it normally, but I just wanted to show you what the realistic upper rate of roll looks like on this vehicle when you go around. You get a little bit more movement, and that's when you notice that the trade-off in comfort that the seats provide you with is going to be that they don't hold you quite as much as you would like. But come on, you're not going to be doing sporty driving. I think you've had a sense as I've pulled away there onto this Autobahn as well that I'm getting just the right amount of speed pickup. The engine sounds great, it sounds comfortable, and at the moment it's telling me that we are arriving at a fuel efficiency of 7.4 litres for every 100 kilometres driven. Now, we will update you later on that figure to see how it changes throughout the day, but it's interesting to me to note that before we took the car out this morning, I reset that number, and that number was at 7.4 earlier on today. So I think that's going to be a realistic real-world usage figure for this car, and I've got to be honest for you, for a car of this size, that's not bad at all for real-world usage, and it does it extremely comfortably. Two other points which I think are worth mentioning about the driving experience, very minor, but they do to me just give away a little bit of the commercial basis for this vehicle. Have a look at this. I think the camera can see just over my shoulder this swoop up, the design on the window. Now, you're not going to spend most of your time looking at that, but every single time you turn around to check your blind spot, there it is. I don't know if I would have maybe liked to have seen something done on the interior, matching that swoop down so you're not staring at the inside of that piece of exterior. It just always sits at the back of your mind a little bit like something that's maybe stuck and you need to pull out or move to one side. Another thing is this. See if you can pick this up on the microphone. Now, you may or may not be able to hear that. That's the indicator noise. Now, when you design a commercial vehicle, the most important thing is managing to make the driving experience comfortable, but also safe, because you're designing it for people who are driving a lot of miles. Here we go again. Now, part of that, it's very subtle, but it's definitely there, is that when you have that indicator noise, it's heightened a little bit in a commercial vehicle to make sure that it has the full attention of the driver. In a passenger vehicle, it's usually softer and more discreet. Now, you can say, come on, really? Are you going to notice that in day-to-day use? Well, you might think not. But if you're putting down some serious miles in that car, it's the kind of thing that can potentially drive you insane. So I would just suggest trying it out and finding out if it's fine for you and it doesn't bother you at all, or if it does grate a little bit, because obviously that's one of those very important details about a car that you cannot change and you do have to live with. So see how you find it. If you've driven one of the older versions of this vehicle, I'd love to know what you think about the indicators in that. Please let us know in the comments below. Very quick note now on the infotainment system. I would like to give a big thumbs up to Opel on their job with the navigation system in this car. It really is fantastic. A lot of the times when we take out test vehicles, we immediately switch over to using Google for navigation because it's such a clean and easy to use interface. Well, I'm really pleased to be able to tell you that the navigation that Opel have fitted is great. It really works well. And that is kind of nice because, you know, what do you expect? The 8-inch touchscreen is not quite as responsive as you might like. Changing menus feels a little bit clunky. The UI is not fantastic. But as long as you just want to leave it set onto its navigation, you are going to be really happy with the experience. I think I am. And that goes a long way to helping with your driving experience of this car. Obviously, you can talk to this system. I have a button where I can look down and just tell it what I want without needing to bother to look through menus, and that again makes the experience a lot nicer, especially given how accessing some of those menus while driving is not really terribly practical. So overall driving impressions of the car are very, very nice. You really have to be realistic in terms of what you expect out of the drive of this vehicle, and I think it delivers everything in great comfort with really no effort whatsoever. Jonas, you agreeing?
Yep.
That's a thumbs up from Jonas as well. Well, we've had the opportunity now to bring out the long wheelbase in the 7-seater version and have a little talk about how that's different. Well, the nice news is when we look at the pricing, and we'll get into that a little bit later, you don't have to pay a huge amount more for the long wheelbase model. Very interesting to hear what Opel had to say earlier about the proposed split on these vehicles. Now, I would say it's a really very simple decision for you, based on how often you think you are realistically likely to have to take out 7 people in this car. There is no denying that once you get into the long wheelbase version, you are much more in the realm of a commercial vehicle. The drive itself has stopped feeling quite so much like a car and is much more reminiscent of a van, but the thing that really reinforces that is the solid roof. The panoramic roof, unfortunately, is only available on the short wheelbase version, and that's important because a lot of what makes the short wheelbase feel so much more like a fun minivan and less like a commercial vehicle is that glass roof. You really do miss it a lot when it's gone. The drive is very comfortable and assured. I'm just left with a feeling that if I wanted to drive goods around town predominantly, this is the car that I would want to get. The long wheelbase offers you so much more in terms of flexibility and practicality after all. And as we'll show you a little bit later on, that third row of seats really works in the long wheelbase. You can sit back there in genuine comfort and manage to spend a significant amount of time back there on a longer journey. In the short wheelbase, well, sadly we don't have a 7-seat version of that to try out. But looking at the available space in the rear, I think we all know that's going to be an option for children and not really that much else. Well, the drive of this is nice. In particular, I have the opportunity to tell you about the automatic gearbox that this is fitted with. Well, the gearbox is nice. Now, it won't come as a big shock to you to learn that if you go automatic instead of manual, it is going to cost you a little bit in acceleration terms. As far as fuel efficiency is concerned, according to Opel, the longer wheelbase only hurts you by about 0.2 of a litre in terms of your fuel consumption. I'm not quite sure that I'm ready to believe that yet, so we've reset the numbers in here to see how we compare after we've done a little bit of driving. We'll give you that information in a minute. Talking of the automatic gearbox, here is the selector. Now, I guess that's going to come down to taste. For me, what I really liked about the manual gearbox is kind of what I don't like so much about the automatic. It just feels a little bit not precise enough. I really like automatic gear selectors that give you that same solid feeling you're used to getting from a manual. Now, talking of interesting features, take a look at this. I don't know that I've ever seen flappy paddles on a commercial type vehicle. Is that overkill? Well, it might be. We had a discussion about it earlier. Some of the journalists thought that this made the driving experience a little bit more fun. I guess my argument always is if you want the experience of changing gear, save yourself the pain and just go with a manual gearbox. That is, after all, exactly what they're designed for, and the manual gearbox available for this car is really, really good. Meanwhile, the driving experience is very similar to its smaller cousin, but it's just not quite as nippy or as flexible around town as the smaller version. So I think it's a simple decision for you. If you're looking at this vehicle for commercial purposes, really ask yourself, do I need that extra load space in order to justify getting the longer wheelbase? The same question for you if you're looking at the 7 seats. Do I really need to transport 7 adults around? Now, if the answer to that is yes, this is a fantastic buy, because let's be honest, there aren't a huge amount of different options for transporting 7 people around at this price point in comfort. So I would say that that's a no-brainer. But in terms of everyday usability and enjoyment, for me, honestly, it's a bit of a no-brainer. The short wheelbase is fun, it's modern, it's funky, and it feels a lot more like a car. So I'm going to go that way, and it is going to be more fuel efficient too. Automatic gearbox, well, it's nice, it's refined. You can certainly drive around town without being bothered by it at all. But it does cost you a little bit in terms of performance, and the manual gearbox is so good. Honestly, that's the way I'm going. That's my taste. What do you think? So what does all that extra space on the long wheelbase do to the aesthetic of this car? Well, I think Opel have done a very nice job here of making that extra space not look too boxy and too van-like. Look, it's going to have its critics who are going to say it's just a van. I understand that, but they have done an awful lot in styling terms to try and break up that shape to make it just look a little bit more characterful. These details of having the windows not that traditional square shape you expect with vans, it just makes it look a little bit less box-like. Now, I don't love this styling detail from inside of the car, but outside you'd have to agree. The way that this window swoops down here and the angularity of this design of window really does make the car look a lot less boxy. It does, however, also emphasize this extremely large B-pillar, which I think I may have mentioned while I was driving. I am a little bit disappointed that we're not able to bring you the 7-seat configuration in the short wheelbase, because it really would be great to be able to see if it was practically achievable to have 7 people in this car. As you can see in the long wheelbase version, I have acres of room. Look at this. I have very short legs. I'm 5'10" or 178 centimeters, but as you can see, look at all that room. Even Jonas could be comfortable back here. I've also got plenty of space between me and the other passenger. There's more than enough room here. It's kind of what makes me think maybe, just maybe, I could get away with the 7 seats in the smaller one. Now, as we mentioned earlier, we have over 3 meters of load space back here. That can be a little bit tricky to visualize. So just for fun, we're going to try something out to show you quite what that space looks like. So, as you can see from the shot from outside, these seats do look a little bit like an afterthought in terms of the design. That is obviously necessary because the rear axle has to go somewhere, so we can't bed these seats down into the base of the vehicle. But taking them out should be really simple. If you want to fit more in the back, you can simply tumble them forwards like that. But to remove them is really very straightforward. Well, so let's pop that down for just one moment. And let's find something that's around about the same size as me. Well, this is Jonas' small tripod. Haha, Jonas, very funny. Apparently, it's what he always brings to film me because he doesn't need his big one. Well, this is about 5'10" or maybe a little bit higher than that. And you can see if I load this into the vehicle, the door will shut comfortably there, and look just how much more extra room I have in the front. I really can't think of anything that you're not going to be able to fit in the back of this long wheelbase. Just look at this room. Wow, and that gives you an almost completely flat load area. Really, I think if you're an IKEA shopper, you're going to be very happy with this vehicle. Let's take a look under the bonnet and see what's powering this thing. Well, this car has the more powerful of the diesel engines fitted into it. I think the first thing you can say, taking a look in this engine bay, is you can see what happens when you go with a modular platform. Look at this. It's like somebody stole half of this engine. Now, we did ask Opel whether they had any plans to introduce hybrid versions of this vehicle. They said they couldn't possibly comment about that. So I think that's a fair indication that possibly we might see a little bit more of this engine bay being used in future. But for now, the engines on offer we have are 1 petrol and 2 diesels. This is the more powerful of the 2 diesels available. That produces 130 horsepower. The milder one is going to kick out 102, and if you go with the petrol, that's 110 horsepower. Having driven them, I would definitely recommend going with the more powerful of the diesels. It's not like driving a rocket ship, but you just want that little bit of extra pickup, and it definitely makes you feel happier about driving what inarguably is still at its heart a commercial vehicle. Now, in terms of fuel efficiency, I mentioned a little earlier on that they claimed the only cost to you with driving the longer wheelbase was going to be about 0.2 of a litre. And quite brilliantly, I'm very happy to tell you that that is the truth according to our driving. The final figure that we ended up with mixed usage on the short wheelbase was 6.1 litres for every 100 kilometres driven. On this car, we have 6.4. Driving style's the same, the driving environment's the same, so it's nice to see that they're very close to within each other's margins. Now, I think it's important to point out, if you look on the website, the numbers you'll get are more like 4.2 and 4.5. As I'm sure you know, that all comes down to how you do the testing. So when you're comparing published figures, as long as you're sure that the methods of testing are similar, you should be able to compare like with like. Invariably, they're not usually that representative of what real world usage is. That's why as many times as we possibly can, we try and bring you those accurate numbers. So in terms of a vehicle of this size, I think 6.4 is a pretty good average usage number. It's not a small vehicle and it drives quite nicely. So I think you're going to be quite happy with efficiency. It'll be exciting to see what other engines they come out with in future, but for now I think the entry 3 that they have on offer are good solid choices. You compare those with either a 5 or a 6-speed manual gearbox or an 8-speed automatic, depending on the trim line and the model that you go with. My choice there, definitely the 6-speed manual. Have a go, let me know what you think. We've been joined by Tobias Stover, and he is the head of light commercial vehicles here at Opel Vauxhall. He's going to talk to us a little bit about what the thinking was behind the new combo. Tobias, thank you for taking the time to talk to us today. This is the 5th generation. Tell us what the thinking was behind this new design.
Well, actually, I mean, the thinking was we wanted really a quantum leap with this vehicle from the previous generation. I think we have delivered on all the items. We have highly efficient powertrains that are all Euro 6D temp ready, and we have 19 driver assistance systems, which makes it a leader in safety and comfort. And looking at this baby here, I mean, you can see all, the practical stuff. It's great for, for craftsmen. And a very strong feature is that we can load 2 Euro pallets even into the short wheelbase version of the Combo Cargo.
Even the short wheelbase?
Even the short wheelbase, exactly.
Now, commercial customers tend to be very particular in their requirements, and they're certainly not quiet about coming forward and telling you what it is they want. There have been lots of feedback over the years about what people need from these smaller commercial vans. Can you show me some of the features that you've baked into this to make it so practical?
Well, I mean, actually, there is one super cool feature, which is the overload indicator. It basically prevents commercial customers to overload the vehicles. I mean, we know specifically craftsmen, if they put like a Euro pallet or 2 with tiles or something in the vehicle, they want to make sure that, the vehicle is not overloaded, because that's a safety risk. And this is one of the cool features. Another one is basically the all-around vision that is kind of positioned where you see typically the rear view mirror. And, there's no windows here. We know that this is a concern for customers. And with that, you really can maneuver the vehicle completely safe, and it can prevent from any damages, because we know specifically for commercial customers, cost of ownership is a big topic.
Now, we talked a lot about that earlier. We're standing in front of the short wheelbase version. I still can't quite believe you can fit 2 Euro pallets in this, but we have a longer wheelbase version over here, and that actually already has 2 Euro pallets fitted into it.
Exactly.
So we can take a look and see what that actually looks like when it's being used.
Absolutely.
And also, I tell you, the other thing I'm very keen to see is whereabouts in the car you'll fit this weight limiter. We saw a little video of that yesterday that showed us how that would integrate into the design.
The overload indicator is placed over here, so it's easy to basically see, and also when you move the stuff in so that it's all inside and you can control the weight. And as you can see here with a kind of dummy example, I mean, you can fit a lot of stuff in here, and if you have the long wheelbase version, there's even more space left for stuff to fit behind the Euro pallets. It's quite impressive, and it will even make the Combo attractive for current mid-van buyers.
And now we can fit up to a metric ton of load into this, is that correct?
That's absolutely right. We have a payload of up to 1,000 kilograms, and I would say that's quite an argument for the new Combo.
So for anyone who's thinking of buying one of these things for commercial uses, if it seems so straightforward to me, it's ridiculous. You put your load in, you push the button, it will tell you whether you're underweight and safe to drive off. And that's huge, because if you have lots of staff working for you, it means you absolutely know that they're safe and there's no excuse then for them leaving with an unsafe load. That's, I think, a huge development. Now, I have to ask you, this is first and foremost a commercial vehicle, but a lot of noise has been made about the Life edition of this having been built from the ground up as a car rather than as an adaptation of a commercial vehicle. What was the approach? What was the thinking behind that?
Well, we wanted clearly to develop the Combo first as a passenger car, because we know that these customers, they look for functionality, but they also want to experience the same level of comfort and safety that they are used to from a passenger car. We know that there's a lot of customers from monocabs, for example, moving into these vans here, and we wanted to have a compelling offer for them. This is why we really started with a passenger version. It's fully loaded with all the latest technology. Not only safety, but also, for example, with regards to infotainment, 8-inch color touchscreen, connectivity with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. So all the good stuff that everybody is expecting in a passenger vehicle. And derived from that, then basically we developed the van. And of course, that is also a benefit for the commercial customer, because he will get exactly the same driver assistance systems that we offer on the passenger, and so it's a great offer for both private and commercial customers.
So we've taken a look at the short, this is the longer wheelbase. Tell me, what kind of split are you expecting customers to buy these in?
Well, if we look at the commercial version, it's very clear that there is a slightly higher share than on the passenger for the long wheelbase. We expect round about 35% of cargo customers to opt for the long wheelbase version. On the Life, actually it's a bit lower. There we expect around 15%, which of course is a fantastic offer, especially if you opt for the 7-seat version together with the L2, because then you fit 7 passengers and you still have plenty of space left in the trunk.
Now, this might be a bit of an unfair question to ask you just on the hoof, but if I really want to buy one of these and I can't wait, so I want to get one now, and I know the cameras aren't available till 2019, am I then going to be able to get those fitted at a later point, and the load system in particular?
A retrofit of these two features is actually not possible. So you would basically really have to wait. But as said, I mean, 2019 is not so far out, and we will have it early 19. So I think who really wants it will have to wait a few months. But I think even without these two great features, the Combo is really a strong proposition.
Well, guys, I already told you earlier on, I'm a little bit of a fan of commercial vehicles myself. I would be really interested to know if any of you out there choose to drive commercial vehicles, even though you're not a commercial user. As I said, I've got a bit of a soft spot for that. I really like the Life, but there's something deeply appealing to me about something that I can fit all of the equipment in that I need to at any time I want and just go. It looks great, it drives really nicely. Thank you, I think you did a great job with the design.
Appreciate that, and we are also hopeful that many customers will fall in love with the Combo as you do.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Let's have a talk about pricing. Well, what does all of this experience set you back? The very, very basic entrance level model comes in at just under 20,000. But you can get it in different equipment setups, obviously, and the 3 different lines that they have come in at either just under 20, just over 23, or just over 26,000. Now, as is often the case with test cars, they fully load out our cars in order to make sure that the customers have the opportunity to see all of the features and tricks that they have. So our short wheelbase version, fully loaded, came in at €33,000. Now, I have to tell you, I think that's an awful lot of car for the money. If you want to go with the same thing, but in a longer wheelbase version, that's only going to add just a little bit, about $1,500 to the pricing. Unfortunately, however, because the short wheelbase was the top line, it came with that panoramic roof, and as I already mentioned, sadly, you cannot get that for the long wheelbase. So what do I think? Well, I've actually changed my mind. I started doing this whole review thinking I was going to come away telling you, get the long wheelbase. There's no reason for the short one. You're really going to be mad with yourself if you need that extra space and you don't have it. Well, I have changed my mind. And the reason for that, I guess, is threefold. Firstly, for me, that panoramic roof is a must. It really adds such a nice dimension to the experience of driving this vehicle. It makes it feel so much more car-like, and the short wheelbase inarguably is more pleasurable to drive. It is much more like a car and much less like a van. As for the 2 poor people in the way back scrunched up, they can live with it. Just make sure they're not too close friends of yours. In terms of value for money, I think what you are receiving for $33,000 with that car is extraordinary. I challenge you to find me something that's that well equipped at that price point. I really don't know that you will. Now, with all of those features on board, yes, you're going to have to make some compromises, and it's still going to be up to you to decide if you can live with what you're driving or not. What do I mean by that? Well, you can well imagine doing this job. I get asked all the time by people, which car should I buy? Which car is best for me? Almost always what happens is I recommend what I think is the best compromise between what they can afford to pay and between what they need the vehicle for. And you know what happens? They never ever buy what I recommend. Why is that? Because they just want the look and the appearance and the aesthetic a little bit more than the practical application. So I know we're not going to be able to do anything to convince some people that even though an SUV might be stylistically what they want, in practical terms and where price meets function, this is the car they should buy. Well, it's up to you. But for my money and Jonas's money, we're all about practical application, and this car has it in stacks. You really can't find a better solution at this price point. So I would encourage you, even if you think ordinarily, but it's a commercial vehicle, I just don't know if I can live with that, take one out for a drive. And more importantly, take one out for a drive with the kids in it and see what they think. Because I can tell you without even needing to check with mine, they would absolutely love it. Although, having 28 different places to shove all of the stuff they like to put in my car might drive me more than a little bit crazy. Well, that's about it from us from Frankfurt. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any comments or questions, please put them in the comments below. Please subscribe, and we hope we'll see you again soon.